wherever you go, just in case somebody asks you to reenact the scene, right?
Jack LaLanne.
By the way, speaking of Jack LaLanne, you said you were how old?
I'm the big 6-0.
He's in pretty good shape for 6'0". Wow. As you can tell, John Pizzarelli is one of our great guitar players. His dad, His dad is Bucky Pizzarelli, also one of our great guitar players. And grew up in a jazz family, right? And basically, you told me, and it was a story that I ended up putting in the book. John plays a very integral part in the book. He's one of the characters that I write in his voice. And John comes towards the end of the book and meets Frankie Presto when he's in hiding in Manila, and recalls meeting him when he was a kid. But this was actually true. You know, I actually came and interviewed you, and then wrote this part, and you told me about like what post-gig things were like in your house, because your dad played with everything.
Yeah, since my father would, when anybody came to New York who never got to New York a lot, or just in general, there were some guys in town, like Les Paul lived just a town away, and would come over frequently, just hang out at the house and play with my father and talk about music.
Really?
But in particular, the one was the jazz guitarist Joe Pass had come in from California to play in New York City, and my father said, yeah, Joe Pass is coming over for Saturday for lunch. So that's how my father talks. And so that was the first time I heard Joe Pass play, and he was sitting on this chair, and he just started to play jazz with just his two fingers on this guitar that was there, and I was sort of going, oh, that's like not anything I've ever heard before. And then we had eggplant parmesan, you know.
Now, they came for your mom's cooking mostly, right? After gigs?
Yeah, they came to play a little, then they stayed for the cooking. My mother would cook, and it was the big deal. Once Benny Goodman played, my father played with Benny Goodman, they played nearby, and you know, he came over for dinner afterwards, which was about 11 o'clock at night. So there was just a select group of people, and we weren't even allowed downstairs. You know, it was one of those things where we could peek and see the feet of the King of Swing. That actually,
that was it.
Yes, there would have been violence.
So dinner in your house started at midnight.
Well, for those kind of occasions, there were some. I still actually there's a party. I don't even know if I mentioned it once, where I was up sleeping. It must have been at 3 in the morning, and my father threw a guitar across the room. Not my father, Les Paul threw the guitar at my, said, play some classical guitar, boom, and you know, and I hear crash, boom, bang. And then the next thing I hear was Raymond, you know, and my father could play those pieces, so, but that was, you know, that's how things happen. There's still, that guitar still exists with a crack right here that Les Paul gave it.
How much did having a father play guitar, and I've seen you guys play together, and it is remarkable. I mean, there's a symmetry, there's a chemistry that goes on that has to be in your DNA. It's not just in your playing. How much does having a father play the same instrument encourage and light the fire under you to do the same?
Well, that's the reason I do what I do. I mean, if my father were a plumber, I'd be sitting here going, and the reason it's dripping.
You might not be sitting here.
Right, that's right.
No, he'd be in the building, but he'd be back there in that bathroom that isn't working off the side of the stage.
But I think we had a family of musicians. That's how they grew up. My father's uncles taught him guitar at must have been in 1938, around that 1938, 1939. He learned guitar from them. Same guys taught me banjo when I was 6 years old in 1966, and so, you know, the whole thing was about Sundays at Pete's house, my father's uncle. We'd go over, and then the only way you could, you know, get anybody to pay any attention to you was to learn a song, you know, so you could get into the group. That's the way you got in. And my father's friends, you know, like I said, Zoot Sims, Les Paul, Joe Pass, these were the guys. So the only way you could get in was to learn their language, and their language was Honeysuckle Rose.
In case some of you don't know, John Pizzarelli currently has out a fantastic CD of Paul McCartney music. And while he could have just done that on his own, it was inspired by an unusual letter that you got. And just before you do this, one of the things you're going to do, just tell everybody about when the FedEx man knocked on your door.
Well, I had recorded with Paul McCartney in 2012. I played rhythm guitar in a record of standard songs that he...
Wait, first tell the elevator story of Paul McCartney, and then lead into that one, okay?
So what happened was, I was outside the elevators of the Carlisle, where I worked at the cafe. I work at the Cafe Carlisle this month, and my wife and I were standing there, just going over what was happening, and we had known that McCartney was staying in a hotel. And sure enough, just before we're about to go in the back door, which takes us into the cafe, Paul McCartney walks in, and my wife's speaking to me. I hear nothing. I just staring at Paul McCartney. So I'm standing there with my guitar, and McCartney looks at me and he goes, "All right, what have you got? Give us what you got." And I go, "The best things in life are free." And he goes, "And you can give them to the birds and bees." And we start singing. And so he's like, "Oh, look at the guitar there, And my wife says, "Hi, I'm Jessica." And he says, "Hi, I'm Paul." And she goes, "I know."
And you tried to get him to play with you, to come in.
Yeah, I said, "No, you gotta," you know, and so we spoke, and we're all sort of staring at him, and we said, "No, we're going on." He goes, "Oh, you know, you're going on to work, I'm going to bed. Have a good night." Yeah. So, just as he said, you know, we just sort of stared at him, the elevator door opened, and he backed into the elevator going, "You can give them to the birds." The elevator closed, and that happened.
So, years later, you get this FedEx.
So I had worked with him, and then that was 2012, I had worked with him, and then in 2014, May 28th, not that I remember, the FedEx man came to the house, and he goes, "I got this FedEx for you," and he says, "It's from London." London, and I look at it, it says it's from MPL Communications, and I said to the guy, "It's from Paul McCartney," and he says, "Sign here." New York FedEx.
And the letter said.
And the letter said, "How's Mitch?"
How's Mitch?
And the letter said, I had this idea that I needed to run by you. "Dear John, I had an idea that I wanted to run by you. I just thought it would be interesting if you would think about doing your take on my post-Beatle catalog, some lesser-known things too. And if you like the idea, maybe you'd call the record Midnight McCartney. And if you like that idea, maybe the picture on the cover could be a dishy picture of you against the Manhattan skyline." And so we had not only the repertoire, but the name of the album and the cover, all in one album. And it was all typed out. The letter was typed out. And then it said, "Or you may think this is the ramblings of an old songwriter with too much time on his hands," which I said to the letter, "No." And it's typed sincerely, and the only thing written was the word Paul, and then in parentheses, McCartney. Just in case you didn't know.
And right now there is a beautiful CD with a picture of the Manhattan skyline, Midnight McCartney, and all the songs that he suggested.
Yeah.
It's fantastic, and please, you should pick it up if you haven't heard John's
Get the
version.
book first.
The last thing that I want to ask you to do is, so I went to John, and in the book, John's tale is he finds Frankie Presto at the end of his life, and he's alone, he's holed up in an apartment in Manila, his wife has died, and he asks him if he's written anything, and he has like half a song, just a verse of a song, and he says, "This is the only thing I've written since my wife died." And John says to him, he hears it, he says, "It's great, you know, you should record it. Are you going to record it?" And he says, "No, you can have it," and gives it to John. And so I asked John if he would write a melody to the lyrics that I had written, just as these other songs that you've heard tonight are lyrics that I've written. And he's such an amazing talent. Just do the first, you don't need to do the whole thing, but just that first verse there and give them a taste. But this is what happens when you get to collaborate with people who are so much more talented than you. They make you sound good.
In my case, I played I showed it to my wife too. We worked together, and she said, "This is great," and she actually helped out too. So,
all right.
In full disclosure. Yesterday I saw her
were gone and I like that lonely bird in the nighttime, with no place left to land, I drift away